Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're joining us for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across a number of weeks. Now, if you are joining us for the first time, you are a little bit late. We're in the final part of exploring the evolution of the slasher. We've already explored the evolution of the slasher, in fact, so go back and have a listen. There's about 13 other parts in which we cover everything from Hitchcock in 1960 to It Follows in 2014. What we're going to do this week for the final part is, well, it's just going to be me reflecting on a few final thoughts, looking back at everything we've covered, what we've learned in the process, and it's also going to give me a chance to count down my top 10 slasher movies, for me to count down your top 5 slasher movies, and to read some feedback that we've gotten from listeners throughout the series. As well as that, now this is the part that makes me slightly nervous, I'm going to be joined by my good friend Bryan, who comes from the big movie quiz in London, essentially. He runs his own sort of pub quiz. He's a big movie fanatic. He's a really big horror fanatic, actually. And I invited him onto the podcast this week to come and give me a test to see how much I've learned on slashers over the last 13 weeks. So he tests my knowledge in a little feature that I'm going to name, in keeping with the whole slasher theme, The Final Exam. So I'm going to be doing that later on in the episode. That's your chance to listen and also play along, see how well you do, see how much you've learned over the last few weeks. So I'll be joined by Bryan very shortly. Now, before we get started with everything else, let's have a little recap. Let's look back at everything we've learned over the last 13 weeks as we conclude the evolution of the slasher.
The slasher is one of my favourite genres too.
Is it?
I love the way they can sort of like revisit it. You can be nostalgic, you can use references, but as long as you move it on a bit further yourself too.
In 1978, John Carpenter made Halloween, a movie about a man named Michael who wore a white mask and stabbed teenage girls to death with a kitchen knife.
Michael!
The movie sparked a new age in horror and launched a subgenre that we now know as the slasher. Unlike almost any other subgenre in horror, the slasher became so clearly defined with such a clear set of rules in such a short time.
You look at other genres and the evolution of them, and it takes years for them to evolve. With slasher films, it happened in 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, it was so immediate, and I think there's something, you know, it's such a kind of zeitgeisty subgenre, and it's kind of fascinating to look back at it, and it's kind of hard to think of another thing where it's so completely crystallized and so concrete so soon in. And audiences knew that. Audiences understood exactly what they were going to go and see each time.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really interesting about that.
So what are the rules of the slasher? Well, the rules are simple. Number 1, the slasher is predominantly focused on a group of young people, usually at school or in college, all being killed off one by one in a linear fashion by some kind of monster.
Hello? Hello?
Number 2, the monster can take any form. It could be a human psychopath, it could be some kind of supernatural monster, or it could be something completely undefined. But it will always brandish some kind of sharp weapon that can penetrate flesh, be it a knife, an axe, a chainsaw, a machete, and it's always something phallic. Point 3. All the drama tends to derive from the kill scenes, whether it's the suspense of the chase or the sheer gory spectacle of the kill. The murders themselves are the most vital and important set pieces in a slasher. Everything around them is simply window dressing. It's a way to connect the dots to get us from one kill to the next. Point 4. The slasher movie tends to involve some kind of moral retribution. The young victims tend to be guilty of some kind of minor vice, whether it's drink, drugs, premarital sex, a crime committed, or a dark secret from their past.
I know what you did last summer.
Point 5. As well as a monster, every slasher film has a final girl. Someone pure, virginal, often with male or masculine tropes. She usually has a unisex name like Chris, Sydney, or Laurie.
Hello, Sydney.
According to Carol J. Clover's theory of the final girl, she becomes masculinized through phallic appropriation by taking up a weapon such as a knife or a chainsaw against the killer. John Carpenter's Halloween, whether intentionally or not, set up every single one of these rules, which became solidified when movies like Friday the 13th replicated them and launched them into the mainstream.
Halloween did it with kind of class and intelligence and sophistication and all these different things, and Friday the 13th just came in, up to the gore, kind of chopped the characters and the character development, and it was box office smash.
But Halloween didn't arrive out of nowhere. Many films prior to this introduced different elements and tropes that became important to the slasher. In the 30s and 40s, cinematic spins on Agatha Christie novels such as 13 Women or And Then There Were None introduced the idea of the body count movie, of an entire narrative being structured around working its way through victims one by one.
7 little Indian boys chopping up sticks. One chopped himself in half, and then there were 6.
There are 5 of us left. One of us is a murderer.
But these movies often worked more as mysteries or character dramas, and they weren't so much played for scares. It wasn't until 1960 when the concept of the modern-day body count movie was introduced in mainstream horror. Alfred Hitchcock made Psycho, a movie about a man who dresses up in a costume and stabs people to death with a knife. Neil Brand argued that the shower scene in particular, not just the murder itself, but the way it's shot and scored, marks a point where the horror movie matured.
He adds in more and more bass end of strings. So it starts with just the first violins, then it's the first and seconds, then it's the first seconds of violas, then it's the first second violas, cellos, then it's the first second violas, cellos and basses.
Yeah.
So there is this horrible sense of kind of something going deeper and deeper and deeper. That is chilling enough on its own, but it's not going, oh, how awful this is happening.
No.
It's not going, help, help, get me out of here. It's not doing any of those things. It's making the sound of a knife. End of. You don't have an emotional attachment to those people. And maybe that is where the horror movie grows up.
And of course, one of the key things that the slasher is both criticised and lauded for is that we often don't care about the characters. We're often not invited to feel emotional connections to them. We're only tuning in to see how they die.
Halloween is a great slasher movie, and so many of its imitators don't understand it. Because it's not about Michael, it's about Laurie. The whole film is dependent on you falling in love with Jamie Lee Curtis. But not just her, but liking her friends. Awful as they may be in some ways, you have to be invested in them to be frightened by the fact she's menaced by Michael. And Michael is a guy in a mask.
Psycho blended the gothic horror movie traditions of pre-1960 genre movies with modern-day characteristics and storylines. Kim Newman described the way in which the movie combined all different genres in one.
Half it's shot like a horror film, and it's half not. Half, the kind of the daytime half or the shower murder half isn't like a horror film at all. It's like a kind of rather sunstruck melodrama. When you leave the motel and get into the Bates house, then it's a horror film.
Previously to 1960, you knew you were looking at a horror film. It would be set in a gothic mansion, it would be shadowy, it would be expressionistic, it'd be a dark and stormy night, there'd be cobwebs, creaky floorboards, it might be set in Transylvania or in some hellish alien far-off world. Psycho introduced horror into the real-life modern-day America, something that all slashers would pick up on. Slasher films don't necessarily have the look of old gothic horror. They're set in summer camps or in white picket fenced suburban neighbourhoods. They're in worlds that feel familiar to us.
Look out! Look out! Look out! Take care. You are being watched.
But perhaps an even more interesting precursor to the slasher movie, not just in terms of the content itself, but also the reaction to it, was Michael Powell's Peeping Tom from the same year. Peeping Tom was a seedy, controversial movie about a man in London filming himself stabbing prostitutes to death. Although Powell's movie and Hitchcock shared certain similarities, they were met with polar opposite reactions. Critics treated Peeping Tom in the way that many critics treated 80s slashers 20 years later. They accused it of being a dirty, scuzzy, evil, immoral movie with nothing to recommend it. Michael Powell was almost too ahead of the curve. If he had made this movie 20 years later, he might have had gore-hungry young audiences lining up around the block. But instead, the movie ruined his career. But word had spread about Hitchcock's Psycho. Everyone was talking about it. People weren't talking about the mystery elements, the characters, even the story. They were talking about the murder scene. They were talking about the movie where a woman is stabbed to death in the shower. Following this, through the 60s and 70s, directors began making films where shocking, gory murder scenes became the central set pieces of a movie. They became the whole reason to go and watch this film.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to witness some scenes from the next attraction to play this theater. This picture, truly one of the most unusual ever filmed, contains scenes which under no circumstances should be viewed by anyone with a heart condition or anyone who is easily upset.
Herschel Gordon Lewis, for example, was making micro-budget late-night horror movies like Blood Feast that promised shocking, graphic murders and buckets of blood, but not much else. But there were some Italian filmmakers who were taking this idea to the next level. When Mario Bava made Blood and Black Lace in 1964, a movie about a group of models who were all being brutally murdered by a black-gloved wearing killer in lavish, spectacular fashion, he was unaware that he was actually creating the blueprint for a new subgenre known as the giallo.
It soon became synonymous with particular nasty murders done, lip-smackingly, described. But it didn't really kick off until Blood and Black Lace, which was Bava's, still his absolute masterpiece and one of the giallo films of all time. I watch it literally once every year because it's just so astonishing to watch, just from a colour point of view. Bava, because he was such a great technician and a great sort of, photographer, cinematographer, he knew exactly what to go for with these films. And if you ever see that, the colour palette, the style, the angles, everything about it. And he minted most of the cliches in that film that would be taken on by the German Krimi films, which is sort of like a similar offshoot, and especially by Dario Argento when he did Over the Crystal Plumage, which was his very first giallo.
How do I open the door?
I think the thing about Plumage is that it gave birth to the populism of giallo, but it hadn't yet found the ingredients that would turn it into the slasher origins yet.
Absolutely.
Because it was the success of Plumage was directly responsible for Bay of Blood happening.
In 1971, Mario Bava pushed giallo one step further with Bay of Blood, a movie that included a bunch of teenagers misbehaving and all being brutally murdered one by one in extremely gruesome ways. Sound familiar? This Italian giallo style had begun to influence American cinema in the 1970s. The influence becomes obvious in movies like Alice, Sweet Alice, which lends a certain brutality and lavishness to the murder scenes in an otherwise procedural psychological thriller.
What was horrible was you see the death of Karen on screen.
Yeah.
You see her die, and I wasn't expecting that, seeing a child die on screen.
While all these movies in the 60s and 70s influenced different slasher tropes and elements in different ways, There was one movie which is often cited as having the biggest influence on Halloween. What do you think was the most important movie that came before that may have influenced John Carpenter?
That's easy. Black Christmas.
I know what you did, Billy! Filthy Billy! Billy!
Black Christmas was a film about a bunch of sorority girls being killed off one by one in different graphic, elaborate ways by a deranged psychopath. The influence is completely obvious, and when you revisit the film again, it almost seems absurd that Halloween is the movie lauded as being the original slasher. Black Christmas does everything that Halloween does, but a few years earlier. Perhaps the only main difference is the personality of Jess, the final girl.
I think it's Halloween. I think she's... Well, actually, she's not the first final girl, because actually the first final girl is not a final girl. Because the first final girl is pretty much Black Christmas.
Oh, you're right. This woman is absolutely determined that she's going to have an abortion.
Yeah.
She doesn't love her partner. She wants to break up with him. You know, she is very much a modern woman.
Yes.
And all of them are, actually.
Halloween took the body count format of 13 women, and then there were none. It added in the coldness and the suspense of Hitchcock's Psycho, the murderous gaze and point of view of movies like Peeping Tom, the beautifully shot and lavish set-piece murder scenes of the Giallo movies, and set the story around everyday innocent teenage girls like Black Christmas. It honed all of these key tropes from all of its forerunners, but it stripped away any elements of convoluted story or even mystery, making it a movie that was purely designed to shock and terrify.
Well, obviously, it's a primal thing. It's a movie that really gets into the fear of what's out there, the fear of being alone, the fear of the unknown. I think anyone who's ever spent an evening at home alone and they hear a noise outside, and you can easily imagine that would be Michael Myers. It gets you on a really primal level. Michael Myers is another reason why it's such a huge hit. He's such a memorable character within horror, and I'm kind of a little sad about what they did to that character over time.
Away from being a great horror film, it's just a great film. You're never, it's not sprawling in any way, and I love that. Like 10 minutes in, you're straight, you know what's going on. He's going back to Haddonfield, and Donald Pleasance's character, Loomis, he's going back because he's evil and he needs to recapture evil. You know, the stakes are there. That's exactly what this film is.
Twitch of the Death Nerve, the Mario Bava film, Black Christmas, all these films were before Halloween, but Halloween was the one that really kind of nailed it, that took the kind of the essence of what it was and really boiled it down into this kind of purely perfect exercise in suspense. And I think that was the one that, while it may not have been the first, it's definitely the one that it was the kind of game changer.
Halloween became the biggest grossing independent movie of all time. Slashers were now mainstream. Big directors like Brian De Palma were making their own twists on the slasher format with movies like Dressed to Kill.
Dressed to Kill. Michael Caine, Angie Dickinson, Nancy Allen. Dressed to Kill. Murder made to order.
I think the phrase, the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, it does do that to me with, the key scenes, the elevator scene, probably the chase in the train I think is scary, but a lot of what he's doing is taking the Hitchcock kind of technique and elaborating on it and doing even more stuff to kind of visually thrill the audience. And it just so happens that he can get away with more. So it's almost like, well, what if Hitchcock was directing in the 80s, And I think De Palma makes the point quite clearly that if he was directing in the 80s, he would have been doing this kind of stuff. He would have had even more sex, violence, nudity, and as you say, bordering on porn, probably, because he could have got away with it. So it's like, well, I'm going to do what Hitchcock couldn't get away with in every way. And what more can you want?
But studios also realised that they could make a slasher film for next to no money, with new, inexperienced directors and young, inexperienced actors. So when Sean S. Cunningham made Friday the 13th in 1980, a cynical movie that almost directly replicated Halloween with no originality of its own, but more gore, hundreds of other filmmakers followed suit.
The result of it was imitation, essentially. So, you had a series of films that came out afterwards. So, Prom Night, Terror Train, Happy Birthday to Me, April Fool's Day, The Initiation, Final Exam, and these kind of millions of films that came out
What I found most interesting recording this series is that almost every single guest admitted that they had their first slasher movie experience when they were too young.
But I just watched it for the gore. That's what you wanted to watch it for. You just wanted, and you wanted each one to be more gory. You just wanted it to be more ridiculous and more bloodthirsty. That wasn't really any great artistic desire from me, age 12. I just wanted to see the most disgusting things I could, and then to tell my mates about it, because you weren't meant to be watching it.
It seemed as though the slasher was a subgenre made about young people, for young people.
These were movies that were talking directly to the youth and the kind of young filmgoer. And in a lot of the concerns and the things it talked about, they were quite inane.
Mm-hmm.
It is just, as I said before, who's going to go to the prom, or am I going to pass this exam? Am I going to do this? What's going to happen there? And, this isn't the stuff of great drama. This isn't the stuff of kind of great intellectual cinema that's going to be, discussed and kind of critically acclaimed and all these different things. But for the people that they were for, it said something to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be invested, and actually you felt like you were being taken seriously.
Yes.
For once.
As ideas began to run dry in the mid-80s, Wes Craven reignited the slasher with A Nightmare on Elm Street, taking the slasher format into a dream world, giving these stories even more scope and more possibilities.
We all have to go to sleep. We all dream.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's a universal fear.
Yeah.
To not be able to go to sleep and to not dream, and to have someone, attacking you in your dreams.
Yeah.
That's what's so brilliant about it.
The movie also introduced Freddy Krueger, and slowly but surely, characters like Freddy and Jason and Michael became the stars of the show. In the late 80s and early 90s, the slashers had turned into franchises, fantasies. We had everything from killer dolls to leprechauns to slashers set in space to killers pitted against killers in showdowns.
Yeah, they found themselves in a catch-22 situation where people wanted the body count movie, but wanted to be entertained by it still, and you can't keep doing the same thing. Which is why when you look at things that Friday the 13th did, and what Halloween did, and what Nightmare on Elm Street did, is they tried to bring in what they felt were interesting elements, but really what it did was alienate audiences, because the things that they were doing didn't work within the framework of a slasher movie.
For many horror fans, it became clear that ideas had run dry. Censorship and video nasties were also killing the slasher.
The video nasties sort of scandals and the kind of moral majority strike back just made it seem like there was these films were too much trouble. They were more trouble than they were worth to at least big budget filmmakers. Now obviously you still had the very, very tiny budget people who could still make a living getting the VHS tapes out there, getting them into rental shops, and that model still worked if you were like micro budgeting. But anything higher than that, like, it was just too much hassle. You were going to have to deal with censorship.
Without the buckets of blood and gore, what could the slashers offer? In 1996, however, Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson offered up a new slasher format with Scream. One that relied less on sex and violence, but more on smart writing, suspense, the dramatic chase scene. It was more about the foreplay than the money shot.
Who's there? Who's there?
Once again, a new era of the slasher movie was born, one that was much easier for studios to sell in the mid-90s. No graphic tit shots, but plenty of famous faces to fill the movie poster and drive audiences in.
Gone is the over-the-top blood and guts.
Yeah.
And in is the high budgets.
Yes.
And the familiar faces.
As with every slasher boom, after a few years it began to decline. And in the dawn of the 21st century, with everything going on in the real world, the slasher movie almost seemed too kitsch, too cheesy.
I know, obviously one of the most often kind of heard complaints about horror in the 90s was that it was kind of slasher movies, but they were getting it was all PG-13, and it's no blood, and it's TV actors who don't want to get naked and stuff, and it's that's sort of the classic forum complaint about horror in the late 90s. And then obviously in the early noughties you start getting the kind of return to kind of grimy, gritty, brutal 70s and 80s horror. People like Alex Arjar and Rob Zombie and Eli Roth and Neil Marshall and all those people.
In the mid-noughties, gore, violence and brutality returned to the horror genre. Slashers had evolved into something new.
The torture porn genre was the first to go another step beyond that. And I think it took that genre and that sustained brutality of that genre to actually shock us again. And so that's why they had to go further. And there was a bit of an arms race for a while of how nasty you could go. And then again, you come across people's limits and you have to stop for a while and really think.
Human centipede, first sequence.
In all its different formations and evolutions over the last 40 years, the one thing that has remained constant with the slasher movie is that it's always a format that draws young audiences into cinemas. Young audiences that are scared but excited to watch people die. Mary Wilde explained what it was about this idea in this format that appealed to audiences so much.
The slasher is a really convenient kind of representation of something connected with sex, which kind of it sort of gives an abrupt money shot of something that's usually covered. So for me, I've often thought that a slasher film, all the gore and all the kind of predominance of a representation of blood going everywhere, I can't help but think that it's almost like in a way functioning in a similar way to the money shot of ejaculation in porn.
Totally.
The reason why it has to kind of, emerge in that way, and the reason why people connect to it in a very visceral level, on a very visceral level, not even cerebral. It's very kind of, a gut reaction.
Yeah, totally.
I think the reason is because in normal society, in normal civilization, where people have to be polite and there has to be like a kind of acceptable unspoken code of conduct where you can't just say whatever you want whenever you want or do things that without consent, that kind of thing. To have a kind of the context of in a context like horror films, particularly slasher, when something can occur so dramatically, so forcefully, so, as you say, penetratively, and chaotically, it's kind of, in a sense, I believe, maybe connecting on an unconscious level to a rejection of order and civilization.
Right now, we're living in a world where the big money-making horror movies are about ghosts, jump scares and suspense. The Conjuring, Annabelle, Insidious, It, and other PG-13 type movies. When it comes to slashers, all we seem to get is either nostalgic comedic throwbacks like Detention or The Final Girls, or interesting highly acclaimed spins on the format like It Follows that remain very low on gore and visceral thrills. But how long before the bloodlust returns? If there's one thing that the evolution of the slasher has taught us, it's that it seems every generation has a certain hunger for sitting in a safe space with their friends, switching off their brains and enjoying the guttural, visceral thrill of seeing people get sliced up in the most gory, elaborate ways imaginable. It seems to me that it's only a matter of time before the slasher movie rears its ugly head once more.
Careful. This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
Okay, well there we go. Slashers are done. What an incredible 13 weeks it's been. I hope you have enjoyed listening to it as much as I have recording it. It's been a real treat for me getting to sit down with a bunch of critics and experts and fans and just chat slashers. On that note, I want to take this opportunity to thank every single co-host and guest who has joined me this series. So a huge thank you to Kim Newman, Rob Watts, Michael Blythe, The Final Girls, Ollie Charles, Neil Brand, Dan Martin, Alan Jones, Rihanna Dillon, Mary Wilde, Jacob Stolworthy, Chris Hewitt, Boyd Hilton, James King, Brad Hanson, Helen O'Hara, Kat McLaughlin, Jonathan Hatfull and Tim Roby. What an incredible lineup of guests, a bunch of people that I never really would have imagined getting on my podcast. So thank you so much to all of those people who agreed to do it free of charge as well. So, very, very kind of them all to join me. Okay, well, let's see how much we've learned over the last few weeks. Let's see how much we remember. This is the part that makes me slightly nervous because now it's time for my end of term quiz. So to give me my final exam on slashers, I am joined by my good friend Bryan Ryan. Hello and welcome, Bryan.
Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, just for anyone out there who doesn't know you, tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Well, I am American. I came out here
first and foremost.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people ask me if I'm Canadian, which is
Do you know
odd.
What? I actually was going to ask you that.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
It's because I don't have. Well, I'm from Texas, so I don't have the Texas drawl anymore.
Right.
So I haven't been there in so long, and I went to a school in New York, an acting school in New York, and it more or less neutralized my dialect. So, and I just got used. I don't know. It wasn't a conscious effort on my part not to do it. It's just that's the way I talk now. So yeah, I get asked very often if I'm Canadian. So, but I'm not. I'm from Texas.
See, yeah. Whereas us horror fans just associate Texas with chainsaw massacres and stuff, and we think of that kind of an accent, and it's nothing like yours.
Well, there are people with that accent, but I definitely. Not
you.
Not my end of the state. No.
And so, So you work in visual effects and stuff?
Yes,
right?
I do. Yeah.
Amazing, fantastic.
Yeah, I work in production on visual effects.
Okay, cool.
For a company called Double Negative.
Yeah, and then so obviously also the reason that you're here today is because I found you on Twitter because you run a quiz. It's a pub quiz in London, isn't it? A movie quiz.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. How long have you been doing that?
We've been doing it for about a year now, outside of because we were doing it for a company that I worked for before that for about a year. Now outside of that company, we've been doing it for about a year.
Yeah.
It's kind of taken off. We have a lot of regulars.
Yeah. I've heard all about it from various different people.
We've actually, I mean, it's we're really proud of it. My partner Matt and I, we kind of came up with it together, and we just like to just go out and have a good time with people. And it's all an all-film quiz. We're actually moving into a new venue for the new year. So in January's quiz will be at a new location, twice the size. So
cool.
Yeah, so now we can get more people in because we've been having to turn people away because of the capacity size of the old location.
Wow. So where is it? Where for people that want to find it, people that are in London, what's it called and where will it be?
Well, it's called it's called the Big Film Quiz.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Big Film Quiz on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
Great.
I'm really bad at keeping up with Instagram, but you can find us on there. And we're starting in January. We're going to be at the Albany. That's right across from the Great Portland Street tube stop, right on Great Portland Street. There, great pub.
I have had many a pint in that pub.
It's an amazing space. Yeah, we got really lucky. The guy who runs the place really liked the idea of us moving it there, and he's a big movie fan. So
nice.
Yeah, we tend to we have kind of a template that we use. Every month we do a featured film. We kind of treat that like a book club.
Right.
Basically, the winners from the month before get to choose a film.
Great.
And then we do 10 questions about that film. And January's film to kick off 2018 is An American Werewolf in London. Yeah. So you gotta come.
God, I've gotta come to this. Yeah. So tell me then, you must have a pretty good knowledge. I mean, you can be big-headed about yourself now. Have you got a pretty vast film trivia knowledge?
I do. Now, that's not to say. I mean, I know a lot of people who have a lot more. I mean, there's always somebody who has. It's like wine or coffee. There's always somebody who knows a hell of a lot more than you do. But yeah, I do know a lot. It's funny because that's the stuff I remember. You know, I don't remember. Anything from my French class. I don't remember anything from biology class. Yeah. But I do remember. I can tell you what theater I saw Dick Tracy in.
Great.
And that's the stuff I retain. So it's just we just want to get a bunch of like-minded people in the room, and yeah. I mean, I'm pretty proud of my knowledge, but there are definitely people who do know more.
And then final question before we get started: what is your what are your thoughts on horror? Are you a fan of the horror genre?
I'm a huge horror fan. Hey. Yeah, we did a horror quiz last October, 2 months ago.
And which one of my co-hosts, Brad Hansen, was going to, and he was trying to get me to come and be on his team, and I couldn't because I was working.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been much help, to be perfectly honest. But he's got a good knowledge. So
oh man, yeah,
he knows his stuff.
Yeah, I know Brad. He's one of our regulars, and he's great. Yeah. And I knew he would do really well on that quiz.
Yeah,
and I've always, even as a kid, just gravitated towards horror films. You know, I would probably say that's where I kind of land. In that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Got a favorite horror film?
That's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Of course it is. Yeah.
You know, it's funny though. I hadn't seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre up until about 10 years ago, though.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid.
Yes.
Because there's this stigma surrounding the film, and you're always like, the same thing they do with like a Serbian film now, or
absolutely.
Human Centipede, things like that. I just avoided it. So one day I decided, I was when Netflix still delivered movies, and I decided I was going to watch it.
Yeah.
And
it's phenomenal. I mean,
it's amazing.
It's my favorite ever horror movie as well. And do you know what? It's what's so genius about it is that we still talk about it in that same context as things like a Serbian film or the Human Centipede, and yet there is nothing in it graphically, gratuitously, that is shocking unlike those other movies.
Right.
And like, what is just I don't want to geek out too much about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but what is just so phenomenal about it is that you feel like you're watching some sort of snuff film, and yet there is nothing on screen that is really, it's all psychological.
Yeah,
it's all the way it's filmed. It's the ambience. It's the style. It's the visuals. It's just so brilliant. It's just expert filmmaking.
I absolutely I agree with that, and I think I do actually have it on this as one of the slasher quiz questions.
Yeah. Well,
but I don't consider it. I think it stands apart.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Like as its own, it's totally. I mean, I guess if it's gonna land anywhere, it would be a slasher film. But it's totally
almost
unique.
impossible to place because it's so unique. Yeah, you're right. Like I've had a lot of feedback from people saying, why haven't you covered Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Because I've been doing slashers these past sort of 12, 13 weeks. It just doesn't feel like a slasher movie to me, and there's something more there. There's something else, I think it's tonally, because if you say on paper, right, okay, it's a guy in a mask with a big phallic weapon slicing his way through teenagers. That does sound like a slasher movie, and yet it's so different. It's something so much worse.
It's so it's from the very beginning frame of the film.
From the opening monologue,
and I do think it's the perfect horror movie. And I mean, I think it's just above The Thing for me. John Carpenter's The Thing.
Couldn't agree more.
Those are my top two.
Yeah, so, me too. And then closely followed by The Shining. They are my favourites. Yeah. And I think I've seen you on Twitter also stick up for my opinion that Black Christmas is one of the best slasher movies of all time.
I think Black Christmas is the slasher film. I think
we're going to get along famously.
It's the perfect slasher movie.
It is. Yeah. It absolutely is.
It's terrifying. It's that movie that you just you literally turn all the lights off in the house. Mm-hmm. You turn the sound all the way, or not all the way up, but as high as you can tolerate.
Yeah.
And just let it take you, man. It's to me, it's the quintessential slasher film. I mean, it's perfect.
What it has that a lot of other slashers don't have is that it sends chills down your spines. It's got that kind of element to it as well as the fun, the gore, the chase, the teenagers.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the thing that is still, I mean, I remember I introduced my wife to it maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago, something like that. And she was like, well, we never find out who he is or why he's doing what he's doing or even what he looks like. I mean, you kind of get a glimpse in there, but... Yeah. And that's so... You would not find a movie being done like that. A movie wouldn't do that today. I mean, even the remake, they gave him a backstory. They made him yellow for some reason.
No, for God's sake, we don't talk about... That movie doesn't exist. Amazing. All right, let's get to it then. So basically, I've got you here today, and I've asked you, as somebody who knows their stuff, who runs a quiz, to give me a little quiz on the slasher genre. So hopefully everyone listening can sort of play along with this.
Yeah.
It's what, 20 questions?
20, yeah.
I'm very, very nervous about this because, as I've mentioned, I love the genre. I love movies. I don't have a good brain at retaining knowledge. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully you've gone easy on me on at least some of them.
Well, I think I've made a good mix of painfully easy and some difficult ones.
Okay, all right. Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's
based
good.
on some of the slasher films I kind of generate toward, that you don't really hear a lot about.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, great. All right, good. All right, well, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so
what we can do is, if you read me the question, I'll answer it, and then you could tell me there and then if it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
And we'll do it that way and kind of count as we go.
Yeah, no problem.
Rather than the kind of I'll write them down and we'll mark them at the end or any other.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Excellent. All right.
So we'll start with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Of course.
Number 1, in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, whose grave are Sally and Franklin hoping to visit?
It is their grandfather's.
It is.
Oh, thank God. I was thinking, I've just waxed on about how it's my favourite film, and now I'm going to get a question wrong. This could be really embarrassing. Okay. All right, so far so good.
Nice. Number 2, this 80s slasher was co-written by Harvey Weinstein.
Ooh, I don't know. God, this is so bad because I've talked for so many weeks about 80s slashers, but there's so many of them.
This is one that was kind of lost. I think lately it's had a resurgence, but it was kind of forgotten for a while.
Harvey Weinstein, let me think. Okay, I don't know, to be honest. I am just going to have to take a guess of an 80s slasher. It's got to be one that I haven't seen in a long time because I can't think of one. I will say Maniac.
The Burning.
Oh, my God, I have watched The Burning like 6 weeks ago. Fuck's sake.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. It's actually really, as far as Friday the 13th ripoffs go,
it's the best one. It's better than Friday the 13th. Yeah, I mean, me and Michael Blythe talked about it here in this very room, and we talked about how it has probably the most nasty, visceral kind of murder scene in any 80s slasher. You know, that raft scene,
the boat to boat,
is something that you will never forget. You know, it's amazing, absolutely amazing. I am ashamed of myself for not getting that.
You know what? Can't win them all. All right, so we're going to move on to this one. Okay, number 3. Which of the following is not a member of the Dream Warriors?
Okay.
Joey Cruzel, Roland Kincaid, Taryn White, Tina Shepard, or Will Stanton?
Oh, you must be tricking me a little bit there, because I'm sure all of those names... All right, let's think about this. Could you just read those names for me again?
Yes. Joey Cruzel.
So Joey Cruzel is the one I think who doesn't talk. Yeah, carry on.
Roland Kincaid.
Kincaid is the one who thinks he's some boxing guy when he becomes a Dream Warrior. Go on.
Taryn White.
Taryn White, I think, is the one who becomes the badass with the knives, right?
Tina Shepard.
Tina Shepard. Tina. Tina's from the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm going Tina.
Well, it is Tina. That's not part of the Dream Warriors.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And Will is the
Wizard Master.
The Wizard Master. Yeah. Tina Shepard is the final girl in Friday 7.
Oh my God, the telekinetic girl.
Yeah.
I was thinking Tina from the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Okay.
Yeah, it was a trick question.
Okay. Nice. Because I was sure there was a character in Dream Warriors called Tina, but yeah, I was thinking of the original. All right, nice.
All right. This film was highly marketed with the tagline, "On May 6th, see Paris die."
Oh, yes. I went to see it from that tagline. That is the remake of House of Wax.
Yes.
Very nice. Very
good. I have a soft spot for that. It's not great. It's not even good, but it's fun.
It is fun. It is absolutely, unashamedly what it is, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. Even from the tagline, it's like...
They know. Yeah.
They know what they're making. Yeah, absolutely.
It's fun. Okay. This film was the last original slasher to be given a wide studio release before the release of Scream, and it's a span of 4 years. So in 92.
Oh, okay. Original slasher. So it was like the first of a series or something.
Well, maybe.
It's the first. But it wasn't a sequel. Yeah,
yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. 1992. This was a bad time for slasher movies. Let me have a think.
Or a good time, depending on
what your tastes are. I mean, this is the era I discussed with Brad Hanson.
Yeah.
And he had seen a lot more of these than me, and he told me about a few. He mentioned one called Rumpelstiltskin.
Oh, man.
He mentioned one. We both talked about The Leprechaun, and that might be 92. We talked about the Child's Play movies. That was a little bit earlier.
Would we consider Leprechaun a slasher?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of murders his way through a bunch of people to get his gold.
Yeah.
I bet it's terrible, whatever it is.
I love it, but that doesn't mean anything.
Do you know what? I'm going to have to pass. I'm going to say, just for giving an answer's sake, I'm going to say The Leprechaun, because I think that was that same year.
No. It was Dr. Giggles.
Oh, damn it! Brad did mention Dr. Giggles.
I love Dr. Giggles.
Damn it!
I love
Damn it!
It's really bizarre, it's funny because Brad told me he was doing that, that span of time between, I think it was like Friday 6.
Yeah, it's basically kind of about 1988, 89 to about 95.
Right. And there are some gems in there.
Of course there are. And actually, weirdly, it's also the era that we
great.
had Oscar-winning horror movies like Silence of the Lambs and
Right.
Misery, and weirdly, you've got this kind of opposite ends of the spectrum kind of movies. But you also got like Freddy's Dead and some of the worst movies of all time.
I don't like. I have friends who love that movie.
Yeah. Oh,
but they're also John Waters people. Like, I mean, I think
I have
think
a soft spot for John Waters.
I mean, I love Pecker.
Yeah,
and I can't say I'm a huge fan. I haven't actually seen them.
Oh, okay.
Of the ones I've seen, I would say Pecker is the one I like. I appreciate John Waters as a personality and as a person.
Yeah,
100%.
exactly. That's the thing. It's hard not to love him just for him, almost, isn't it? That's the thing.
And I think that's because the director is Rachel Talalay. I guess that's how you say it, of Six. And I think she had worked a lot with John Waters. And it was kind of doing that. And just the fact of throwing in Roseanne Barr, and it was just so... That's Nightmare 3 is my Freddy movie. Like, that's
100%. Yeah. 1, 3, 7. Ignore the rest is what I would always recommend to people.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the second one has since become like a cult favorite for how homoerotic it is. But aside from all that, which is funny and interesting, I think it's a terrible movie.
It's bad. It's bad. I mean, it has. But any movie with an exploding parakeet is
or somebody getting spanked to death in the shower. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting one. Gotta love the slashers.
Sure.
Right. Let's continue.
Okay, this is the only film in the Child's Play series where no women are killed.
Ooh. So I know for definite that a woman is killed in the original. I'm sure she is in her apartment. I'm sure she is. I'm pretty sure a woman dies in a big waterbed in Bride of Chucky. I'm pretty sure they killed Britney Spears in Seed of Chucky, so that happens. I reckon it's either 2 or 3. The third one is set predominantly in an all-male kind of boot camp. So I'm going to take a stab at Child's Play 3.
That's correct.
Yes!
I guess he almost gets... what's his name? Jeremy Piven's wife from Entourage. I think he almost gets her, but no women were harmed or killed in Child's Play 3.
That's an interesting fact. That is cool. I don't suppose you know that Child's Play 3 was this huge controversial thing, and it was banned here and or nearly banned, withdrawn from release, because it basically is blamed for a crime that happened. Some kids murdered another kid.
Is that
Jamie Bulger?
Yeah.
In the
it's
early
back
90s.
Back in the news right now. Because
is it?
One of the guys now, he was found with like child abuse. I don't know if it was porn or what. Photos.
Yes.
And now there's this big blow up about now they should release his identity, and really that
so funny.
Was,
well, I mean, it's silly, really. Child's Play 3.
It was just probably the horror movie at the time. Yeah,
and I think they happened to have seen it, maybe. But again, I'm sure they had other problems, these kids.
Yeah.
And I think again, me and Brad were talking about this. Of all of them, it's kind of the lamest and the least nasty of all.
I think so. Yeah,
films.
It's not. It is lame, and that is really saying a lot for the Child's Play series. But I don't mind it. I mean, I can watch. There's a lot of stuff. I can watch a lot of stuff.
I mean, let's be honest. Especially if you're drinking a beer, you're with some mates. I could sit through any of these slasher movies. They're all great fun, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right.
Next, Jack Black appears uncredited in this slasher as local stoner Titus.
If it's the film I'm thinking of, I'm surprised if did you say he's uncredited?
He's uncredited. And that may have been because he became huge afterwards, but
Interesting.
He may have requested to be taken off the credits.
I'm going to go with the only slasher I know of that he's in, which is I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
Nice.
Wow, and he's uncredited for that.
Yeah.
He's
not on...
It's not like a small role, really. I mean, it's not like an unspoken... he has a proper...
I mean, I didn't watch it to the end to see if he's actually in the listed credits.
Yeah,
but I mean, at that point, he had been in...
He'd been in
maybe.
things.
I mean, it wasn't... I mean, I guess High Fidelity is when he really broke out, and that was like 2 years later. But he'd had to have... He was... I don't know.
It was around the time of Tenacious D and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was the kind of late 90s, early 90s.
But he's not on
Fascinating.
IMDb.
I bet that's shame, isn't it? That's shame.
I'll be honest, I don't mind that movie. I like it better than the first one.
It's like it takes itself less seriously than the first one, doesn't it? When we were discussing both of these movies, and the first one has a massive chunk in the middle where it's very slow and procedural as they're trying to kind of uncover this backstory that we don't really care about that much. At least the second one is just like chuck them on an island, kill a bunch of them off.
Yeah, that's exactly like it's. I don't care about the backstory. Just start killing people. I've literally seen the first one once, and I don't remember loving it.
The thing is with those films as well is that the backstory is so terrible.
Right.
Like we don't care who this guy is, really. Let's be honest. It is terrible. Okay. And Jack Black, white Jamaican stoner.
It was
in that,
a great performance and a great death, actually.
A great death. Yeah, it has something to do with shears, doesn't it?
He's sitting and he's smoking pot. Of course, he has the dreadlocks. And I guess the guy comes in and stabs through his hand to the table.
That's it.
I think he stabs him through the throat or through the mouth. Or something. Something amazing.
Nice.
This is going back a little bit.
I watched Humanzee last night with Jack Black, funnily enough. That was a different type
I
of
worked
experience.
On that.
Oh, did you?
How was it?
Great, and the VFX were excellent.
I can't take credit for that. But,
no, it was good. It was good. I mean, I'm such a diehard fan of the original. I kind of grew up with the original, and I loved it. This one is not... Again, it's kind of going back to what we were discussing earlier before we started recording, is that it's not quite got that edge that the original had in terms of it's not trying to scare you in any way. The first one, when you're a kid, is still quite...
dark.
Scary and dark at places. This is just an out-and-out comedy with Jack Black and Kevin Hart and The Rock.
Kevin Hart and The Rock together.
Yeah.
They honestly, from what I saw, that team they have good chemistry.
Yeah, and it is funny. It's just not quite what I wanted from a Jumanji movie. Yeah,
right. Do they at least honor the original?
They do.
Okay,
they do,
nice.
and I won't spoil too much, but it does at least. It does, in a kind of weird way, it connects itself to the original, which is nice.
I remember kind of being bummed when I got assigned to do it, but then watching the dailies, I was like, this is kind of a blast.
I think kids will really like it.
Nice.
I really do. I think,
to be honest, it's not a movie for me.
No, exactly.
It's a movie
I
for my
think
nephews.
12, 13-year-olds will love it. Yeah.
Right.
Back to horror.
A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 director Jack Shoulder made his directorial debut with this slasher, featuring Oscar winners Jack Palance and Martin Landau.
Christ, this is so shameful because I don't know who any of those people are. Who is Jack Palance and who the hell is Martin Landau?
Jack Palance he won the supporting actor for City Slickers.
Oh, wow.
The old man in City Slickers.
Okay.
And Martin Landau won supporting for playing Bela Lugosi in Ed Wood.
Oh. Okay, I'm gonna have to take another stab in the dark at an 80s. This is clearly not my forte, is the 80s slashers.
This is a random one.
Happy Birthday to Me.
I love that film, but it's called Alone in the Dark. Donald Pleasance is the doctor or the psychiatrist for this group of really bad dudes.
Nice.
And then there's a blackout, and all the guys escape, and they surround him and his family in their home.
Oh, it sounds
trying
awesome.
to get in. It's okay.
Sounds good.
It has a really interesting twist. I will say. I remember seeing it as a kid and going, oh, and this was pre like Sixth Sense and Fight Club and even Crying Game twists and it shocked me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I will definitely check it out. Sounds good to me. Plus, it's got Oscar winners in it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Let's not mistake that for good performances.
No. Thanks.
Okay. What film's killer wears an owl's head as their disguise?
That is one of my favourites. That is Stage Fright.
Stage Fright. Very nice.
One of the good ones from the late 80s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. This one's a little long.
Okay, go for it.
Supernatural co-stars Jared Padalecki, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles both starred in 2009 remakes of classic slasher films. Padalecki in Friday the 13th, and Ackles in this film, the first R-rated film to be projected in real 3D.
Okay. I think, and this is thank goodness for one of my co-hosts a couple of weeks ago, we were discussing the kind of 21st century slashers, and he said nobody cared about Friday the 13th because it came out at the same time as My Bloody Valentine
Very nice.
in 3D.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I agree with that.
And I
think
100% agree.
It's fun, and it has Tom Atkins in it, and yeah, I'm immediately sold.
Yeah, I must revisit that. I watched it when it came out in cinemas in 3D. I haven't seen it since, but it was a blast. Yeah,
it is.
Great.
It's fun. Okay, what was the original script title for Scream?
Scary Movie.
Scary Movie.
Yes.
A little bit of. It's funny because I asked that in the quiz in October, and a lot of people, and it was a multiple choice.
Yeah.
It was like, is it? I forget the name of the town in Scream.
Yeah, Woodsboro. The Woodsboro murders.
Was it Woodsboro? Was it the Woodsboro murders?
Yeah.
Was it Scary Movie? And when that popped up, people kind of giggled at it because you don't really expect it.
No. It's true. Yeah. I mean, it even without the knowledge of the comedy movie Scary Movie, it does sound like a bit of a rubbish title for Scream. Now that you know it's called Scream.
Well, I'm kind of the exact opposite.
Oh,
I think
really?
if it were called Scary Movie without, it's hard to get past the Wayans brothers. Yeah. Scary Movie films. Not that they did all of them, but they did enough.
Yeah.
But I think Scary Movie at the time in '96 would have been an awesome title.
I suppose
Don't get me wrong, Scream's awesome
Scream
too, though.
Is
but
such an awesome title. That's it. There's something so beautifully simple about it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
I'm surprised it hadn't been done before.
Although
it may
really
have.
surprising it hadn't been done before. Yeah.
Okay. Classic Western tough guy Chuck Connors stars in this slasher about a group of friends stranded at a secluded roadside wax museum being stalked by a masked assailant who uses his telekinetic powers to control the attraction's exhibits.
Wow, that sounds brilliant. There are so many slasher movies I have not seen. It's terrible.
You may have seen this one.
Maybe I have, but I feel like I'd know that plot synopsis is something I feel like I'd remember. He uses telekinesis to make them.
The telekinesis is just kind of a side thing, but it's really just about really creepy wax figures and mannequin statues and stuff like that. Yeah. There is one great moment where just shit's flying at this one guy trapped in a room, and it's great, but.
I'm going to kick myself. I'm sure I'm going to kick myself when I find out what it is, but I can't think of what it could be, so I'm just going to say Hell Night.
Tourist Trap.
Tourist Trap.
Which actually, because, of course, House of Wax is considered the remake of House of Wax.
Yes.
House of Wax is a remake of Tourist Trap.
Well,
I was not in...
I was going to say, it sounds
not
like
officially.
Wax, but yeah.
It is so very close to Tourist Trap. Yeah. There's no telekinesis in House of Wax, but they are very, very similar. That's why I definitely like House of Wax better than.
Wow.
Tourist
Okay.
Trap. Yeah.
Okay. Because it sounds, again, from your synopsis, it sounded quite good. I was like, I need to check some of these films out.
It's definitely different.
Yeah.
All right. This 2006 cult favorite features the tagline: "Freddy, Jason, Michael. We all need someone to look up to."
Oh God, I know what this is. Yes. It's got a really long title.
It does.
It's the name of the guy.
I'll take any part of the title.
I can't remember. It's something about Behind the Mask.
The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
Yes, I was going to say The Rise and Fall of, but then I was thinking that's a slasher documentary.
It's a really long title, but
I think that's partly why that film isn't as popular as it is, because it's a great film.
Oh man, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, how did I not know about this movie?
How is it not a bigger deal than it is?
It's a lot of fun. I think they've been working for a long time on a sequel.
Yeah,
trying to get one crowdfunded or something. But it might be past its time, unfortunately. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay,
you're letting me have that one.
I'll give it to you.
Yes.
Yeah, you clearly knew it.
Yes.
Clearly knew it. Now, if we were in the quiz setting,
well, of course,
I couldn't give it
well,
to
of course,
because there would be many boos from many people.
Of course,
I were to do that. But it's
this is even more shameful. I'm admitting this, but I've worked in television for a long time, and I worked as a producer on Pointless, BBC One's Pointless, on Channel 4's The £1 Million Drop. But in order to, I audition people and find contestants for quiz shows, and I always had to be very harsh.
Really?
You know, like even if they know it but they don't say it, it's like, well, you wouldn't get on the television. So therefore,
no, definitely. I'll let you. You know what?
It's my podcast. It's my rules. Yeah,
exactly. We'll let you make it. All right. Which entry in the Friday the 13th series features a victim being smashed against a tree while trapped in a sleeping bag?
Oh, it's so good.
It's great.
Now, I think there's a couple of sleeping bag related ones, but I think it's Friday the 13th Part 7. New Blood. Yes,
it is. Yeah.
So I mean, it's like one of my favourite. I mean, I'm sure it's probably most people's favourites. It's up there.
Excuse me. I think it is my favorite death of the series, and I'm really more a Jason guy than Freddy or any of the other guys. But that's definitely not my favorite film in the series.
No,
but that's probably my favorite kill in the series. And I think they tried to kind of go that direction with the remake by hanging the girl in a sleeping bag over the campfire.
Yeah.
It's not.
It was such a shame. That was just so nothing, wasn't it? That remake.
The first 20 minutes of that movie.
Yeah.
Was okay.
Yeah,
it was okay.
Where they kind of rushed through the whole first movie.
Yeah. And then after that, it was just kind of like, I didn't like anybody, so I didn't care if they died.
And also, you know, again, we talked about this on the podcast, but like all of those remakes have that kind of visually, they all look a bit sepia and kind of gloomy and a bit dull as well, you know.
Yeah, well, they tried not to. Like they tried to give them that edge, and that's not to say. I mean, I think it's the Platinum Dunes remakes. I mean, I don't mind that. I don't mind the Texas Chainsaw Platinum Dunes remake. It's okay.
It's got a few. It has got a few Michael Bay-esque shots of Jessica Biel as she's approaching the house.
But you go back and watch the original Chainsaw, and they do that to Sally as well.
Very true.
Or not
true.
Sally.
The one that dies. Yeah.
Meat Hook, whatever.
Yeah.
But
good point.
It's often pretty to look at, but they just kind of, you just don't.
A bit empty. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I would say of the Platinum Dunes ones, that's the only one I actually like. Though I haven't seen The Hitcher, but I can't imagine.
No, not very good. No. Cool.
Okay. What is the name of the housing project in Chicago that Helen Lyle visits while investigating the Candyman urban legend?
Oh no, this is another contentious area because I didn't cover the Candyman, and again, I
don't consider Candyman a slasher though. But
good.
So it shouldn't be on here though. I think.
No, it's fine.
Worldwide, it is.
A lot of people think of it as a slasher. Absolutely,
it kind of has that formula.
He does slash people, but there's
not a whole lot of people dying in Candyman, but it is a good movie.
It's like the opening scene feels like a slasher when you hear the tale and you see the girl say it in the mirror and then die.
Yeah.
But then it becomes something completely different from that point almost, doesn't it? I'm saying all this to fill the fact that I can't remember.
Why do you think?
So what's the name of the housing project?
Yeah.
Oh man, I wish I could remember this. It's such a good film. I mean,
it really is.
It is one of my all-time favourites, and yet I haven't seen it in so many years.
Great score too.
I love the score.
Mm-hmm.
Helen. Again, I'm going to kick myself when you say it, but I'm not going to think of it. No, I pass.
Cabrini Green.
Oh, okay. Maybe I wouldn't have thought.
You wouldn't have. All right.
Cabrini Green. Yes, good. All right.
All right. The late Carrie Fisher appears in this 2009 remake about a college prank gone wrong.
God, there are so many remakes in 2009.
Yeah.
College prank gone wrong. No, I don't know. I'll say Prom Night, but I'm sure it's not that.
Sorority Row.
Oh, fuck! Of course it is. Of course it is.
Another
Sorority
one. I actually like the remake as much as I like the original. I think the original is one of the great.
It's great. Oh, brilliant
films.
Great.
I actually think this remake is exactly what a modern slasher film should be.
Yeah.
There's no nudity in it. Not that that's a qualifier for me, but I think that is something that most slashers obviously have.
I think it's a thing that really changed from that Scream point onwards, actually, you'll notice.
Yeah.
apart from a few of the sort of, I suppose, maybe less mainstream ones, but like actually that was when they started becoming a lot cleaner.
Well, that's a friend of mine calls them the cocktease horror movies. Urban Legend. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Sorority Row is it's fun.
Yeah.
Good cast too in that.
After I no memory of it. I've seen it, but it was very unmemorable to me. A bit like Friday the 13th.
That's one I revisit very often. It's one that I just kind of my wife and I will just toss it on just to have fun. It's kind of I don't like to use the term guilty pleasure, but Okay, this film was inspired by an incident where, as a young man, the director followed his own father and used recording equipment trying to catch him with another woman.
I'm gonna take a guess, and I'm gonna say Dressed to Kill.
Dressed to Kill.
Yes.
Yes. Nice.
Thank God.
Nice. I was like, well, I could say De Palma. I could say Keith Gordon or Angie Dickinson or Michael Caine.
Yeah.
Nancy Allen, but
that's
Nancy
an
Allen
interesting fact. So he followed his dad's
at his mother's urging. Followed his own father because she thought that he was cheating on her. So she urged young Brian De Palma to go out and follow his own father with recording equipment.
Wow. Hence the most sort of voyeuristic director of all time was born.
Right. It's like if ever there was any filmmaker who you would think would do that, that's definitely him.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do it. I'm loving this.
All right.
Yeah.
Name the Norwegian slasher about a group of friends who find cover in an abandoned ski lodge only to find it also harbors a psychotic killer.
This is this quite recent?
Yeah.
I loved this.
It's fun.
This is Cold Prey?
Cold Prey.
Yes.
Nice.
I always remember it 'cause it rhymes with Coldplay.
Oh, shit. Now that's all I'm going to be able to think of.
Yeah.
Apparently the sequel's quite good, too. I haven't seen that one.
All right.
And lastly...
Last but not least.
What film... These were put in here random order.
Sure.
I moved them around a little bit. Yeah, I just kind of mixed them around today. What film finds its victims becoming the secret ingredient in Farmer Vincent's fritters?
Oh, I don't know. Fritters.
Yeah. Farmer Vincent's fritters. I guess fritters aren't a thing here, but in the States they're kind of like meat pies, or you can also do them with dough. Or
yeah. Clearly need to scrub up on my 80s slashers, don't I?
You are actually you're doing quite well. There's a lot of yellow ticks on this, which is a good thing. So
I'm gonna go for The Mutilator.
Ooh, no. Good film though.
Good film.
Motel Hell.
Oh, I've never seen Motel Hell. Yeah,
it's okay.
It's
okay.
Yeah.
It was a lot scarier when I was a kid. A great cover art on the video.
Mm-hmm.
That's what drew me to it. That's when I was a kid, I would go. My mom would take me to the video store every Saturday to pick out a movie, and I always picked whatever the coolest horror movie artwork was, and that one always creeped me out. And then I liked it as a kid, but then I bought I think Arrow did a new
they've done a version
Blu-ray of it, and I rewatched it, and I was just like, it's not as good as I remember it.
It's always the way. It's always nostalgia, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, and that's not to say there are some great ones that you can visit over and over, but I think that one definitely could have used even Platinum Dunes would have done well by
sure, yeah.
People would see that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So let's see what the score out of 20 is.
Oh God,
13.
13, not bad. I mean, not great for somebody. Not great for somebody who's just spent the last 3 months of his life just talking about slashers. But there are so many.
I have been accused of making them a little difficult.
No, do you know what? I love that about it as well, because you need that, and also for people listening, there are a lot more hardcore slasher fans than me, to be honest, that listen to this. And it's good to challenge the people that listen as well.
I would really be interested to see how your listeners on Twitter, how they...
Yeah. Please do. Everyone listening, tweet us your score. Just try not to put me to shame too much. We just get an absolute sea of 18, 19s and 20s out of 20s probably. That was great fun. Thank you so much
pleasure,
for that.
Man.
I had a
pleasure.
blast doing that. Love it, absolutely love it. So just tell us one more time again where we can find you if people do want to come along to your quiz. What are the details?
Well, you could find it's Big Film Quiz on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Great.
Or you can find tickets on Eventbrite. It's £5 tickets. We're actually doing early bird tickets for January 22nd now, and the tickets are £4.
And this is the American Werewolf in London.
American Werewolf is our featured.
A lot of keen horror fans.
Yeah. We're doing that one, and we're doing a Steven Spielberg round. We are doing a small war film round for January. It's January 22nd at the Albany, downstairs at the Albany.
Awesome. Any London listeners, get in touch with me. We'll make a little team and we'll go together.
Mate.
That'd be a
love
great
to have
night.
you.
Yeah. Amazing. Brian, thank you so much.
Oh, mate, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, now we're going to finish this episode and this series by getting a little feedback and also listing your top 5 slasher movies. So I did put a post on Facebook and Twitter and social media asking everyone to submit to me their top 5 slasher movies, and I've counted them all up and I've put a point system in place and everything. Took me absolutely forever, but thank you so much to everyone that did send me your favourites. So I have now got a definitive list of the top 5 slasher movies of all time as voted for by the listeners. Now, it's an interesting list, a very interesting list, in fact, because there's one film on this list which I haven't even included in the series. So that might give me a good opportunity to talk about any glaring omissions on the podcast. So here we go. Your top 5 slasher movies. At number 5, voted for by you, is Wes Craven's 1996 movie Scream. Of course, a lot of love for Scream. I mean, for me, Scream is a movie that ticks all the boxes, and I think it's just such a crowd pleaser and such a fun movie on repeat viewing as well. But anyway, I've got a couple of good comments here. Alan Robinson posted to say, for me, it's got to be Scream. It's like a clever, self-aware parody of slasher films with a whodunit at its core. The character references and discussions about old slasher films makes it a perfect tribute to the genre. The perfect combination of Wes Craven directing a sharp and witty script by Kevin Williamson make it a must-watch every Halloween. Yep, I couldn't agree more with you there, Alan. Perfect. It's that beautiful marriage, I think, between Williamson's script and Wes Craven's directing that makes it such a great movie. And I've got another comment here from Ray Rizzo. I think that's how you pronounce it. Apologies if I got that wrong. He says, the easy answer, and of course the first film to come to mind, is Halloween. Of course, I sort of think the atmosphere the film creates elevates it beyond just being a teen slasher and makes it a true horror masterpiece. But I also consider the first Scream to be the definitive slasher of a generation. Not only is it brilliantly meta in its depiction of horror tropes, but the first scene with Barrymore is honestly terrifying, really sets the mood, especially considering the movie is pretty slice of life until the deaths start rolling in again. Interesting couple of things I want to pick up on there. So obviously you've actually said the best one is Halloween, and then you've said that it elevates it so much that it's actually not even a slasher, but just a horror masterpiece. And again, it's this interesting thing, I think, where I think we think of slashers almost as a microcosm of the horror genre itself. We've had a lot of discussions on this podcast here where a lot of people say if something is too good, it's not a horror movie, like, for example, Silence of the Lambs or Get Out or It Comes at Night. And then you've got, by the looks of it, a similar thing here with the slasher, where Ray has said Halloween is so good that it goes beyond just being a slasher. Interesting. I don't agree with that, obviously, but an interesting argument to flag up there. So Scream was your number 5. Now, your number 4 choice. Now, this was voted for by a lot of different people. It even topped some people's lists. And I haven't included it on mine, and I've not included it on the entire slasher series because I don't consider it a slasher. But maybe I am wrong. I mean, evidently a lot of people disagree with me. So at number 4, it is Tobe Hooper's 1974 movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Now, this is a great chance for me to maybe flag up a couple of the movies that I haven't included in this series that I think a lot of people have given me feedback about, wondering why it's missing. The 2 movies that keep coming up again and again and again on this subject are The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Candyman. Now, with Candyman, I find it difficult to see anyone's point of view that it is a slasher movie. I know that it's about a man who has a hook, But beyond that, there is nothing about Candyman, I think, that makes it a slasher movie. This is a movie about a curse, about a folklore, about it's basically a kind of urban ghost story. The movie follows these journalists as they try and uncover this story and rescue this missing baby, and it deals with class and subcultures and all kinds of other issues. And to me, this ticks a lot more boxes in the kind of ghostly, supernatural, curse, folklore type subgenre. I'd lump it in with something like Ring, even. How you've got this journalist exploring this folklore whilst trying to sort of save her own life in the process. To me, it hasn't got that kind of body count aspect of let's see this man murder people one by one with one sort of final girl prevailing. I don't think that is quite the format of Candyman, personally. The sequels, however, of course are, because the sequels cash in and do the stupid thing that most sequels do, and they turn it into a body count movie. But that first movie is something very, very different, in my opinion. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I agree. It's a difficult one for me to argue with, and I can't come up with a compelling argument for why I don't think it's a slasher movie. It just comes down to a gut feeling for me. It comes down to mood, tone, atmosphere. But I'm not a good person to be explaining this. I tell you who is a better person at explaining this, Kim Newman. And all the way back when, at the beginning of the series, I interviewed Kim Newman, and this subject actually did come up. We talked about slashers, and we discussed whether or not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a slasher, and this is what he had to say.
And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of those films that... it's either an extreme art film or an extreme exploitation movie. And your responses to it are like that. It's not a film that you're really going to have much fun with.
No, it's not.
Although
would you class that as a slasher?
I wouldn't. No. I think that if it's got a genre, it's grueling ordeal, isn't it?
Yeah. Because in theory, it's a man in a mask killing off teens one by one, but it somehow feels very different.
Yeah. I think that more I don't know if we've got a label for it, but it's. My first book was called Nightmare Movies, and I kind of feel that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is what I meant. And there's this thing that Night of the Living Dead has it, and The Evil Dead has it, and a few other things of taking place over one night in which something truly awful happens to a small group of characters, most of whom don't make it out alive or sane at the end, and that. Is its own little genre. Maybe it's the Cabin in the Woods genre.
Now, don't get me wrong. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre it's my favourite horror movie of all time. It literally tops my list when it comes to the whole genre. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think it is an absolute masterpiece. I just think that there is something different about that era of 70s indie horror movies. Movies like that, Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes. To me, they're not slasher movies. There's something a lot darker, more disturbing and menacing under the surface. However, this is all my opinion, and clearly I'm in the minority here because a lot of people have put Texas Chainsaw Massacre not just on their list, but at the top of their list of their favourite slashers. So I am absolutely willing to bow down and say maybe I am wrong. And I'm really pleased that it is actually on people's lists because, of course, I love the movie and I always love the chance to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And let's not forget that the scene where Leatherface first appears through those sliding doors, hits a man over the head with a mallet and drags his twitching corpse back behind the door is the most chilling, frightening, unforgettable moment in all of horror. Number 3, very pleased to see this on people's lists. Your number 3 slasher movie of all time is Bob Clark's 1974 movie, Black Christmas.
Hey, quiet! It's him again! The Mona!
I've just got one comment here from someone with a very complicated name. I think I'm getting this right. It's Dave O. Diomada. And he says, "Hi Mike, myself and my husband love the podcast. He's more of a horror fan than me, but I was a slasher fanatic in my teens. After listening to the podcast, we've had a slasher marathon for the last few weeks. He loves A Nightmare on Elm Street. I love Halloween, but I have to agree with you that Black Christmas is better and a criminally overlooked movie. I'm so glad you agree with me on Black Christmas, and I really do feel like it's a better movie than Halloween. And again, as we're about to find out, I am clearly in the minority here, but Black Christmas, a masterpiece. Great choice. Now, with the top two, this was very, very close. Both movies received a huge amount of votes, way more than any other movie, and it was quite close at the top here. But your number 2 movie is Wes Craven's 1984 film, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Simon O'Reilly says, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I was Fred mad. Got loads of old Fangorias full of it. I even went to the cinema in a Fred jumper knitted by my aunt. # sad. Not sad at all, Simon. That sounds pretty fucking cool to me. John Worsley says, A Nightmare on Elm Street deeply frightened me as an 11-year-old. Revisited this Halloween and it totally stands up. The centipede crawling out of Tina's mouth is still incredibly creepy. I agree, John. I agree. That is one of the creepiest moments in the film. Scott Burnett says, A Nightmare on Elm Street for me. The idea that closing your eyes invites Freddy in was and still is terrifying. Again, it's that thing that we've spoken about a lot with A Nightmare on Elm Street, but just the sheer premise alone is just such a terrifying concept. Now, I also received a couple of slightly longer emails about A Nightmare on Elm Street, which I'm going to read now. Funnily enough, this movie had the most correspondence out of every movie. It really seems to strike a chord in people that love it. So this email is from Andrea Stewart, and she sent it the week that the Nightmare on Elm Street episode came out. So here we go. Good morning, podcaster. This episode has been the one I have been looking forward to the most, and let me tell you why. A Nightmare on Elm Street is not only one of my favourite horror movies of all time, but it's also my favourite film as a young girl. I first watched it when I was 6 years old. 6 years old. Now, I know what you're thinking. That is way too young, and I would have to agree. However, it was the fact that I watched it so young that it made such a big impact for me. I still remember my parents not letting me watch it on TV. This was circa 1992. So I would sneak to my grandmother's room and watch it there, as she would let me do whatever I wanted most of the time. I think it was the warning that my parents gave me that it was going to be too scary and that I wouldn't be able to sleep after it. It was the warnings that made the anticipation of this movie so much better. I have to agree that this movie and most of the slasher films of the 80s were for teenagers and young adults. The dread that you weren't really supposed to be watching the film made it all too real. Watching it back now, I can still feel that dread and fear that I did back when I was 6 years old watching the film for the first time. I can laugh about it now, of course, and I can see how quintessentially 80s that film has become. My parents were right, though. I could not get any sleep the night after watching that film. But it was nothing compared to when I first watched The Exorcist. Again, extremely young age while living in South America, where it wasn't banned and was being shown on TV. Wow. I mean, yeah, The Exorcist is a whole different conversation. But thank you so much, Andrea, for that email. Really, really interesting. Now, I've got another email on a similar vein, so let me read that out before I comment. So this email is from Phil Abernethy, and he titles the email, A Nightmare on Catton Grove Road. I can't remember exactly how old I was when I first saw the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but I know I was too young. It was the mid-90s, making me 8 or 9, and my brother, who was 5 years my senior, made me watch all of Freddy Krueger's exploits with him. Hitherto, my only experience of the horror genre was Nickelodeon's Are You Afraid of the Dark, and it's safe to say the Nightmare films kicked things up a notch and left me absolutely traumatised. We were watching them back to back. I was too terrified to move. I wanted to run out of the room, but I was paralysed with fear. I endured the ever more elaborate, fantastically macabre murders perpetrated by this personification of unadulterated evil known as Freddy Krueger. My brother wasn't scared. He had seen the films before and was just putting them on to scare the hell out of me. And it worked. Everything about Freddy was horrible and profoundly disturbing to the mind of a child. The dream sequences in dark boiler rooms, Freddy's invincibility and omnipotence, and the fact that he could get you in your dreams was just all too much for me. I was scared to have nightmares before I saw the film, let alone afterwards. Every time Freddy appeared in one of my nightmares, I would wake up crying, sweating, screaming, convinced he had hurt me in real life. I didn't want to sleep. Life imitated art as I became like the characters in the films, trying all kinds of things to keep myself awake. Needless to say, it took me a while to get over this, and the proliferation of Freddy's appearances in media as a horror movie icon continued to scare me, while for everyone else, Freddy's impact lessened by the increased role of humour in the subsequent Elm Street films. I have since watched all the films in a 2-day marathon with my brother at an appropriate age, and we agreed that the original film and the third film are the best. But it's easy to forget just how scary Freddy was when the original came out. I know I saw it as a child, but objectively, he is one of the best horror characters ever, and the idea of him getting to you in your nightmares is complete genius. Now, with all of the trauma behind me, I can rank A Nightmare on Elm Street as one of the best horror movies of all time. Phil, thank you so much for that email, and Andrea as well, and everyone that sent in comments about A Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, it's really fascinating, and there's a really clear theme there, and it's obviously something that we've discussed a lot with slasher movies, that a lot of the time we all watch them when we're too young, and it's something I discussed with James King. You know, he watched it as a child as well, and I watched A Nightmare on Elm Street as a child as well, and there's something more frightening about Freddy than any other horror movie character when you're a child. He is like a child's nightmare, that's the thing, and the whole movie is like a child's nightmare, as we said in our Nightmare on Elm Street discussion. So I can totally see why that movie traumatized you both so much when you were so young. Really, really interesting that A Nightmare on Elm Street, out of all these movies, sparked the most amount of correspondence and the most amount of stories similar to this one that said, I watched it as a child and it scarred me for life. So there you go. Okay, well, number one, I'm sure it's no great surprise to anyone, so I'm not going to build it up too much, but the number one slasher movie, as voted for by listeners, is John Carpenter's 1978 Halloween. So lots and lots of little comments about this one. We've got a comment here from Laura Breen. For me, the best is Halloween. I've never been a huge horror fan, but after an entire month dedicated to it, it's still the one that terrifies me. And it also refreshed the appreciation and love for Scream, which is easily my second favourite. Bill Allwood simply says, Halloween, iconic. James King says, my favourite is Halloween. It stands apart as a truly impressive piece of filmmaking. It uses simple premise with limited locations to create a true sense of dread that builds throughout. The nature of Michael Myers is brilliantly ambiguous. Is he simply a killer, or has he transcended this to be a supernatural force, as Loomis seems to think? And then James finishes with an honourable mention to Child's Play, which uses the notion of the uncanny to great effect. A child's toy being a killer will always be frightening. Also, the series as a whole, for me, is the most consistent with only one misstep. I absolutely agree with that, James, about Child's Play. Yes, the first one does have this strange, uncanny fear to it, and the series as a whole evolved pretty well compared to most other horror franchises, so thank you very much for that. Marie Sandland says, Halloween. It's just so well made. The music, the direction, Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, they're all great. And like all the best horror films, it's from the 70s. There's something about 70s films that just give me chills. Love the podcast, by the way, and dying to check out Black Christmas now. Oh, well, thank you very much. And actually, Marie, what you might find is you'll watch Black Christmas and your favourite slasher movie choice might change. So if it does, please get in touch. Tell me if you end up liking Black Christmas more than you did Halloween. There you go. And we did get a bunch of other quick sort of comments all saying Halloween is their favourite slasher, of course. So thank you so much to everyone there who gave me feedback and gave me your choices for your favourite ever slasher movie. So I'm just going to count that down one more time. The listeners' top 5 slashers are: at number 5, Scream; at number 4, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre; at number 3, Black Christmas; at number 2, A Nightmare on Elm Street; and at number 1, Halloween. Okay, now before we finish, I'm going to rattle through my top 10 slasher movies of all time. I'm not going to spend long on this, describing them all, because we've gone into so many of these movies in so much detail over the last 13, 14 weeks that I think I've said everything that needs to be said. But for anyone interested, here is my top 10. So for me, number 10 is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors. As we've talked about quite a lot, it's definitely the best of all of the Elm Street sequels. It gets that perfect balance of kind of humour and scariness, and it's got some great characters and a great cast, actually. And it's always fun to watch no matter how many repeat viewings. Number 9 for me is Child's Play. I am a big fan of Child's Play. It's, again, a slasher movie with a bit of imagination. It's got a new twist, a new spin on the genre, and it launches the character of Chucky, who in this original film was scary as well as funny, and pulling off something that is both scary and funny at the same time is a difficult thing to achieve. At number 8, for me, it's Friday the 13th. I'm going with the original because I think it is the best, and I love Mrs. Voorhees. Interestingly, there were no Friday the 13th movies on your top 5, and I think that's purely because so many people did vote for different Friday movies, but all different ones. So the votes were kind of diluted. A few people voted for the first one, a few people voted for the final chapter, a lot of people voted for Jason Lives, and a lot of people voted for Jason X. So yeah, no one movie got enough votes there, but I'm giving the original some love and putting it at number 8. At number 7, I've gone with The Burning. The Burning, for me, out of all of those early 80s slashers, really sticks out from the crowd. It's got some great characters, and it's got that one tremendous death scene. The only early 80s movie that best sits for me is my number 6, which is Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp is just so strange and deranged. It's a slasher movie with a real strange, queasy edge to it. And it's also about children, which adds to the danger. And let's not forget, it's got one of the best twists and most shocking endings in any slasher movie. Into my top 5. For my number 5, it's the most recent movie on my list. In fact, it's the only 21st century slasher. I've gone with Final Destination 2. It's my favourite out of all the sequels. I think it's got the best set pieces, and it's when the franchise really kicked into gear and sort of realised what it was. At number 4, I've gone with Scream, of course, Wes Craven's absolute 90s classic that reinvented the genre, gave something new, again added that humour in, but also never forgot to be a truly scary film. At number 3, I've gone with Halloween. So that was your number 1, it was my number 3. I still think it's a perfect slasher film. There are just 2 films that I like even more. So number 2 for me is the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven's 1984 classic. What can I say that hasn't already been said? It's like this incredible mix of childlike fantasy and nightmarish horror that just works so well with this story and with this villain. And of course, it changed horror and it changed slashers forever. But my number 1 slasher of all time, as I'm sure all of you are probably aware because I've droned on about it so much over the last few months, is Bob Clark's 1974 masterpiece, Black Christmas. To me, Black Christmas has got it all. It's got the scare factor, it's got the acting, it's got the writing, it's got the direction, it's got the production design. Every single box is ticked. It's perfect in every way. The greatest slasher movie of all time. So that is it for this week, and that's it for this series. Thank you so much for listening, and if you have been listening throughout this entire last 14 weeks, then thank you so much. I can't tell you how much it's meant to me to have such an incredible number of loyal listeners stick with the show every single week. And again, thank you so much for all of the wonderful comments and feedback I've gotten from all of you over the last couple of months. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've had the best time. So, what's next? Well, we're going to go on a little Christmas break now, have some downtime, but the Evolution of Horror will be back in January 2018 with a whole new subgenre. We are going to be covering the evolution of the ghost story. Very, very different to the world of the slashers. No more ejaculatory blood spurts, no more sex equals death. Well, maybe a little bit of that. But we'll be covering everything from the old vintage classics like The Uninvited and William Castle's House on Haunted Hill, all the way through to modern masterpieces such as last year's Under the Shadow. So many incredible films to cover. Now, please do keep an eye on social media because that's where I'm going to be posting the names of what films we're going to be covering. I know a lot of people want to know in advance so that they can watch them. And of course, there is no better time than Christmas to watch a good ghost story. So I will be posting names of movies and lists of movies that we will be covering next year. So follow us on Twitter, it's @EvolutionPod, or on Facebook, that's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And join in the discussion group. People are already on there discussing their favourite ghost movies or ghost movie recommendations. So it's really, really great to get involved. Come and find that group on Facebook. Now, if you do want to drop me an email at any point with any feedback, then please do. It's evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. But that's it for now. Have a wonderful Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year, and I will see you again next year for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.